started yet. There's people coming in. Just 1 second.
Okay. Is it hard? Yes.
Let's see that everybody's okay. All right. One of the things that we know that we keep on doing is the cycle of reading the Torah. And already, believe it or not, we are up to the second parsha, the second sedra of the 53 sedras that there are in the Torah. We're already up to the second one, which of course is the parsha, the sedra of Noach, of Noah. So we read it last year, and I don't know if you remember what we learned last year. I don't. And we read it the year before, and I don't know if you remember what we learned the year before. I also don't. And somehow, I think that herein lies, what do they say? The devil is in the detail. But here in Yiddish, they say, this is where the Hund lies begraben. This is where the dog lies buried. We're reading the same things over and over and over again. And to what end, to what purpose? Are we getting the message? Are we listening to the story? And are we getting the message? And I think I'm right in saying that particularly when it comes to these early parshas of the Torah, the ones that are very story bound, that we kind of enjoy the story and we're almost amazed at the end of it all that the people in the story didn't get the message. Why did the people at the time of Noach behave so badly? The flood comes along, takes them out, and we see that people carry on behaving badly. Right away afterwards, after the flood, people kind of default to their previous bad settings. A lot of the stuff that we were trying to, or that God was trying to, it seems, trying to eradicate, comes back to haunt us. And straight away afterwards, there are misdemeanors, there's misbehavior. And you kind of sit with our, what we call our 2020 vision. We sit here looking at it and we say, well, why didn't they get the message? Why didn't they understand the theme, the meaning? Why didn't they get it? Why don't we learn the lessons? Now, if we think about it, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses institutes the concept of Torah reading going all the way back to Mount Sinai. The concept of the Torah needing to be read goes back to Har Sinai. From the time the Torah was given, Moshe said there should be regular Torah readings. The Talmud, the Gemara, discusses this and tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu established live public Torah readings. He wanted it to be just a couple of verses. He said, people need a few verses every day. And eventually the decision was that it should be done not every day, but every so often, so that there shouldn't be a period of 3 days that people don't hear the words of Torah being read. And so thus came about the establishment of Torah readings at least 3 times a week. So there can never be a gap. There can never be an impasse of 3 days when the Torah is not read. And why? They based it on our travels in the desert. When we're traveling in the desert, The main sustainer of life, particularly in a desert kind of an environment, I guess, where you appreciate it just a little bit more, is water. And the same way as a person can't survive without water for 3 days, so you can't survive without Torah for 3 days. Now, in that is a message of the fact that Torah is our life. Torah is our sustainer. It's much more than just a mental exercise. It's much more than just a code of Jewish law. It is much more than just an ethic, a morality, a constitution that we have to live by. Torah is our life. Without Torah, according to Moshe Rabbeinu, according to Torah thinking, according to Judaism, without Torah, we're finita, we're gone, done and dusted. No more Judaism, no more Jews, no more people. We couldn't live. We cannot live. We talk about it. Ki heim chayenu. It is, these words of Torah are our life. They're the very life force. Similar in a physical sense, our water sustains a human being. At a later stage, by the way, the Talmud tells us, there was a famous sage by the name of Ezra. Ezra lived time of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, of the temple. Ezra was even more worried that Judaism would fade away if Jews didn't hear Torah often enough. And he established longer Torah readings, and he coupled them with the market days of Monday and Thursday. And that was a second kind of a phase of Torah reading, needing to be common and often. And why people were coming on market days to the markets. A Jew needs to get the message, I think, that Ezra and Nehemiah and the sages of that time, the men of the Great Assembly, that a Jew needs to get the message that while the whole world can be going about their merry ways, and especially I think they had to think about people in a diaspora mentality. No longer do we have the temple. Now we're in a diaspora mentality. We've got to realize that this is not all about marketplace. This is not all about selling your wares or allowing your business to function, making money. This is about having a spirituality, having a spiritual life, having a life force that is deeper than the physical, that sustains you, that looks after you, that cares for you, rather than the other way around. You know, the famous story that they talk about the sage with the emperor, and the emperor wanted something unique, and he brought him a mezuzah. And he said, "What is this?" He said, "It's words of Torah, and it's written on a mezuzah." What he says, "It's useless to me. What you're trying to insult me? I've got jewels, and I've got wealth, and I've got gold, and I've got all sorts of stuff. You bring me a mezuzah." So he says, "Yeah, but what you don't understand is the mezuzah is the very thing that will protect all of that. The mezuzah can do something for all your wealth." Now we think about Torah, I think, in a similar vein, a similar fashion. It's not just about our physical well-being. It's not just about our physical wealth. It's not just about our health. It's about the very sustainer of all of that, the thing that gives it not only meaning and purpose, but gives it its life. That's our Torah. And each Jew needs to have that message spelled out to them time and time and time again. You are not about the marketplace. You are not about being the businessman or woman. You are not about your physical life. You are about God and godliness and understanding that only that being your main agenda can anything else actually come about. Never mind, can you have it? Can you partake in it? And can you have these physical things? It is only because of your Torah that you're actually anywhere to start off with in the first place. So, bothers one, I guess, that particularly when you come to these parshiot, that why is it that we don't get, they talk about in modern terms, we didn't get the memo. We don't get the memo. We don't get the message, or it doesn't seem to be that we get the message. And we sit back and we say, oh, you know, stupid people, time of Noah, why didn't they realize? Noah's building an ark, and he says to everybody, listen, God is going to cause a flood, and the whole world is going to be placed in liquidation, and it's only going to be those who are on this boat who are going to survive, and the animals and so on, and mend your ways, because if you don't, and you don't realize it or whatever, there's going to be this flood and you're going to be destroyed. And you have this kind of image that it starts to rain and everybody says, well, why didn't we think about it before? But the strange thing is, not only why don't we think about it before, but why don't we think about it afterwards either? Then flood happens, the boat sails away, the animals and Noah and his family are saved. And as we said in the beginning, thereafter, people go back to their merry old and bad ways. And while God has made a promise that he'll never send a flood again, he sometimes sends other little timely reminders from time to time that come along and give us messages. And I think that there too, we don't always get the memo. Human beings are very, very adaptable. Could you imagine Noah and his family with all the animals on the ark? I don't know about you, but I don't think I could live with a couple of animals in my house, let alone in my bedroom, for longer than a very, very short while. And I think it would drive me crazy. Here, could you imagine? Noah built this boat, and it wasn't that big, and it had on it space for his family. And he's got so many animals. And I don't know if it's recorded anywhere. I don't think, we all look at this Noah as like a Dr. Doolittle or a farmer of sorts or whatever. What kind of experience do you think that he had in running a zoo, or any experience whatsoever, or a game farm? What kind of, he's taken this righteous man, take all these animals, keep them on the boat or whatever, and they're on there for a year. It's a long time. It's not just the 40 days and 40 nights of the rainfall. The flood waters stay on the earth for a long time. The best part of a year, he's on this boat. And Noah and his family stay on this boat, and they adapt. They are adaptable. Yes, there were certain rules and regulations that everybody had to follow, but they are adaptable, and they adapt to the new environment. I would imagine at that stage of their being, had there been a press and had there been a CNN or a Fox News or a whatever it is that you follow, they would have said they had to adapt to the new normal. They had to get used to the new normal. The new normal was that you can't walk outside. You're on a boat. The new normal is that you can't do all the things that you were doing before. You start adapting. You become used to not only the closed quarters that you've got to live in, and not only could you imagine, I mean, it's horrible to think about, but the smell of the animals, and the smell of the fact that the animals, I mean, you go to a zoo, there's a smell that all animals make, right? So this terrible stench that there must have been. And there was a place for the ashpa, there was a place for them to throw the garbage and this and that one. It can't have been a wonderful, fantastic, they weren't on the QE2 on a cruise liner here, right? They had the animals, they had all of this stuff going on. They were in closed quarters. Can't have been that comfortable. Yes, it was a miraculous kind of an environment, and all the animals, none of the animals fought with each other and so on. Okay, granted. But there was still some of the physicality of the whole thing and some of the close quarters. And yet, Noah and the family become used to the environment. And as they become used to this environment, so more and more and more, they don't want to leave there. And the proof of it all is that it comes to the time when the whole flood is over. Noah is fairly reluctant. So we go through the whole thing. They're sending out this bird and that bird. And then, Noah does it quite reluctantly. It's not something that he rushes to do. And God has to tell him, send out the bird, do this, do that, start preparing for life after the flood. And not only that, but when the boat actually comes to settle, when the ark settles, And when he knows for sure that the flood's over, there's no more rain, there's beautiful clear skies, and he sends out the bird and it doesn't come back, and he knows that everything has subsided, and he can see dry land, everything is perfect, Noah and his family stay inside. They're scared to venture out. They don't want to go back into the world. And God eventually has to say to him, Noah, what's the matter with you? Get out of the ark. Take your goods and chattels and get out of there. This is not the place you're supposed to stay always. This was a temporary sojourn. This was an environment for a time, for the time of the flood. And this was now, the world has been purged of all of these things. Now you've got to get out and you've got to start making good in the world. Your job is outside and not inside. And I was, oh, okay, good. I didn't get the memo. I didn't get the whole deal there. I wasn't informed. Now let me get out. Let me go. And we look at it year after year after year, and still, I think, we don't always get the memo. So I don't think there has been a more appropriate demonstration of all of the parsha of Noah, than actually what we've been through over the last number of months. Now, it started off, I think, that first of all, we didn't have much warning. I don't think anybody knew that this pandemic was coming. I don't think we knew what COVID-19 was, although COVID-19 is actually named. I mean, it's sometimes interesting just to remind people, remember where COVID-19, where the name actually came from. It was coronavirus December 19, COVID-19. Coronavirus December 19, that's where it actually got its code name from. It started in December 2019. That's when it began. Well, think about it now. We're in October 2020. It's been some time. And we've gone through this whole period of time where the world actually, I think, looked back. How do people deal with floods? How do you deal with pandemics? How do you deal with disasters? So you know what? You've got to shutter up, put up the shutters. You've got to close everybody in. You've got to make sure we don't spread this disease. And we've got to make sure that we protect each other and we protect the world and so on. And yes, rightly so. I don't think anybody's come up with a better solution. And we see that the entire world and governments and so on were able to be concerned really for their citizens and do whatever they could in their power to make sure that this all happened. And then people went into this so-called lockdown, and we spent the months in lockdown. And when we come to the time that we are at now, and certainly in South Africa, there is a kind of a different headspace at the moment. But it's quite amazing that at this stage, I think we're more bamboozled than ever as to what we're supposed to actually be doing. Do we stay inside? Do we go out? And if I go out, when do I go out? And we're living, all of us, I think, and self-included, we're living with all sorts of contradictions in our lives at the moment about the pandemic and about the way we're behaving towards it. In some places, and correct me if I'm wrong, in some places we're going out of our way to be so strict that we are masked up and we are socially distanced and we're so careful. And in others, it's like it doesn't exist at all. I had the experience just last night of taking my second youngest son to the airport. He's going back to America, to yeshiva. So it's been now 6-7 months that the boys were at home, but A, they can't stay forever. B, their programs have opened up, and they need to be back and they need to be doing where their lives have been on hold. So you take a 23-year-old boy and you've put him into this environment. Not only has it taxed them like I suppose it taxed everybody, but their lives were on hold. They weren't studying properly. They weren't in their friendship in the circle, their environment, their whatever. They couldn't move on, etc. It was like a whole year's delay in the whole cycle, I guess, for many, many people, but probably especially in these years where you expected to see the biggest kind of change and growth spurts in their. So anyway, going back to yeshiva, took him to drop him off at the airport last night. So first of all, just out of interest, he flew back. He's still flying, but he flew back via Amsterdam on KLM, and you have this whole big plane. He sent me pictures of what it's like on the plane. There were 25 passengers on the flight to Amsterdam. 25. You start wondering how it can make any economic sense for them to actually do that flight. 25 people. So imagine now, they're checking in at the airport. Out of the airport last night, 2 flights at that late hour. It was late. 1 KLM, 1 Ethiopian flying out there, right? Ethiopian had possibly 100, 120 people. Now that's the sum total of the people in the airport last night. The whole section that was, what's it called? Terminal A, the first terminal of OR Tambo Airport is closed, completely closed off. A few lights on, but otherwise it's locked up. Only there's one entrance to the whole airport open, one entrance into the building. Everybody got to go through there, and you go through security and prove that you had your COVID test, etc. And if you need a reminder of the fact that this COVID-19 story is still prevalent here and around the world, take a little drive out to the airport. And it's a reminder, because at times you can forget. You can walk here through a mall or go wherever, in Santon or Glen Hazel or wherever it is that you go. You see people sitting around. People are eating in restaurants. And they are having social events like nothing. Seems to be like nothing ever happened. And yet, in a shul environment, which I see on a daily basis, we've got masks on and we're socially distanced and people are being checked in and out and taking temperatures and everything, whatever. So in the one environment, we are super, super, super cautious and strict. In another environment, we're not. And people have got used to now saying, well, that's a necessity. And this is not such a necessity. So for the necessities, I'm going to make certain allowances and exceptions. For the not such essentials, I'm going to stay away from it. And we call it mitigating. So we are mitigating the effects. And I get that. And everybody does that, and rightly so. The question, I guess, that we have to sit here today and ask ourselves, if we really want to be Torah observant and Torah intuitive and Torah instructed Jews, we have to ask ourselves, what actually are the necessities? What are our necessities? Is it more of a necessity to eat out in a restaurant than it is to hear a Torah reading? Is it more of a necessity to go shopping than it is to go to shul? From a Jewish point of view, we know the answer, but we're not reading the memo. We're not necessarily listening to it all. And the other interesting thing is, I think, my hypothesis for my shir today is that we have become Noah's family on the ark. We've become, actually, think about it, most of us, not all of us. There are some people who bitterly, bitterly unhappy at home, but we've actually become quite comfortable in our own little jail cells, in our own little cocoons, in our own environments, that I'm telling you, psychologically, it's becoming daily more and more difficult to move out of that space. And we're going to have problems. We're going to have problems in moving out of that space. I don't know about you. I've seen that I think that people are becoming socially limited in many ways. We are being forced not to hug and kiss somebody like when you see them, right? You don't touch, you don't shake hands, etc. Many people are becoming socially limited. We are picking up social interactive issues that we never had before. and people are becoming a bit antisocial. It's becoming a lot easier to stay home than it is to go out. It's becoming a lot easier to daven at home than it is to even think about going to daven at shul. Now, yes, we've got good reason. And the good reason is that there's a pandemic. And the good reason is that you, anybody, may be over a certain age, and we might have certain morbidities. That was we learned a whole new language over this last year. Morbidities and comorbidities and pandemics and whatever. We certainly got a whole new dictionary. But the dictionary of life that we've picked up is somehow that we've seemed to have part of the time got the wrong end of the stick, and part of the time we have picked up issues and problems that we never even dreamed that we would ever have. And that is that we have become not only used to our ark environment, and we've got used to all. So I imagine Noah and his family, as I said, needed to get used to all the bad smells. We've got used to all the issues about being at home and being on top of each other and working from home and whatever, etc. We've got used to it all. And it's becoming more and more difficult to get out of that space. And we keep on telling ourselves, I can daven at home. I can read the Chumash at home. I can run all of my Judaism at home. And here's the bad news. We can't. We can't. Judaism is a communal way of life. Judaism needs other people. Think about it. For a person to say Kaddish, we need a minyan. Think about it. For a Torah reading to happen, it's got to be done in a communal space. Think about all of our prayers. Everything revolves around communal space. Think about a simcha. Think about a bris, a wedding, a bar mitzvah, whatever. Much as we got used to the notion of a Zoom bar mitzvah and a Zoom bris and a private wedding celebration, etc., it's not acceptable. It's not the way that it's meant to be. And we can't here willy-nilly just walk out of here and say, okay, you know what? Well, we got to just chuck it all up. No. There've got to be the precautions and there've got to be the protocols and we've got to be careful. Of course we have to be. But we have to psychologically now start working on getting out of this rut, getting out of the space, and start once again learning the lessons. So if each and every one of us sat down today and made a short list, I don't know, 5 things that I believe that COVID came to teach the world, I imagine we would have on our list the fact that people have become very, I don't know what the word is, but extravagant. You know, people were flying overseas to shop in London, and people would fly overseas for an overnight meeting. Taught us that, you know what, you're throwing away money, and we're becoming, I don't know, completely material. There was this sort of travel bug and so on. Okay, good. That may be one thing that we could learn. What's another thing that we could learn? We could learn the fact that we actually are a lot closer to everybody in the world than we thought. We could learn the fact that a small little bug can dominate the whole world. So how much more so can a small little mitzvah, an act of goodness, make a difference to the whole world? We can learn, and we can go on and on and on, and lots of great and wonderful lessons. Some of them a little bit more practical, some of them a little more philosophical. A whole lot of lessons that we could learn from COVID-19. But have we really learned the lessons? Are we going to go back as we emerge from the ark? Are we going to go back and look at as silly as Noah, his family, and his descendants looked, where right away they started messing up immediately? Or have we learned our lessons? Have we said, hey, 1 second, maybe for me, this COVID-19 came to teach me that I need to be more considerate. Am I going to come out of my ark more considerate than I was before? Maybe what I needed to learn was that I need to spend more time in my prayers. You know, prayers became and they are often very rushed. I've got so much on the go. I've got to, whatever, I've got a plane to catch. I've got to get to Cape Town. I've got to get to here. I've got to do I'll knock it off very, very quickly, kind of on my way to the airport. Or did we learn that, you know what? It's beautiful to be able to slow it down. Now, we've got to think the memo all the way through. We've got to think the program all the way through. It can't just be that, you know what, I learned that I've got to slow down my davening, and the only place that I could do it is at home, and therefore I cannot ever extrapolate it and take it out. No, we've got to go the full program. We've got to understand, I think, that coming out of the ark was an essential. Noah was not told by God, hey, okay, now you learned your lesson. You established yourself so well in this ark, stay there forever. No, he was told, this is a temporary measure. This has come along to teach the world a lesson. This has come along, Noah, to teach you a lesson. But are we learning the lessons? Are we listening to the lessons that are being spelled out? Never mind once a year in the cycle of the Torah, but once a week in the parsha of the week, and 3 times a week on Mondays, on Thursdays, on Shabbos, and even on Shabbos afternoon. These things are being spelt out to us over and over and over again. And are we getting the memo? Are we getting the lesson? Are we listening to the messages that Hashem wants us, that God wants us to hear, and that are being played out for us in actuality? We've had a practical Noah's Ark and flood for the duration of this year. Are we going to get the memo? Are we going to listen to the voices? Are we going to hear the call? Are we going to listen to the program? Or, God forbid, are we going to look as ridiculous as Noah and his family look, and the people, the descendants that come afterwards, where right away we start messing up exactly the same way afterwards as before? One of the things that mysticism, Kabbalah, tells us is that there was an extra Torah reading that happened at Mincha time, or that happens at Mincha time on a Shabbat afternoon. So if you think about the concept of Torah readings, if they are there to enable us to have our sustenance without the 3-day gap, Mondays, Thursdays, and Shabbos makes sense. Why do we read it twice on Shabbos? Why do we have Torah reading in the morning and in the afternoon of Shabbat? So one of the mystical explanations is that Shabbos morning makes a lot of practical sense. People have got time and they slowed down, and so we read the whole parsha, and it takes on a whole learning curve for all of us. Wonderful. Shabbos afternoon is where the question comes in. Why do we read the Torah publicly on a Shabbos afternoon, on a Saturday afternoon at Mincha time? And the answer that is given is because Mincha time on a Saturday afternoon has got a special power that no other time of the week actually has. And that power is, it's called, in mystical terms, it's called the choice of the choicest. It's the choice of the choicest. It's the best possible moment in your entire week from a spiritual point of view. It says at that time, we want to convey the message to each and every Jew out there, and each and every soul, and each and every individual, that the same way as Torah can and does merge together kindness and severity, chesed and gevura, so too can we take, we're about to head out of Shabbos and go into the week. We can take the messages of Shabbos and we can inculcate them into the whole week as well. Once again, we have a similar concept. What is the purpose of Shabbos? Is the purpose of Shabbos simply to put your feet up and have a rest? Is the purpose of Shabbos simply to recharge your batteries, to rejuvenate you? It is a very definite purpose of Shabbos. But part of it is to take the holiness of Shabbos and bring it out into the week. A Jew is not meant to live only in Shabbos all the time. A Jew is meant to live on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And Shabbos is this spiritual energy that you are meant to take, that I am meant to take, that we are meant to take and integrate it into the whole week that follows. We need to be able to merge the holiness with the mundane. We need to be able to take the Shabbos message and put it into the whole week. Our job, actually, is when Shabbos ends, is to leave Shabbos. But don't leave the messages behind. Don't leave the holiness behind. Take the things that seem to you to be counteractive, that the holiness seems to be cancelled out by the mundane, that the positive seems to be cancelled out by the negative. No, your job is to take that holiness and push it into the mundane. Your job is to take that positive energy and push it into what is perceived to be the negative out there. And so we've got to come out of this pandemic. At some stage, we've got to get out of the mindset of being completely enclosed and so on. Yes, once again, repeat, we've got to take our precautions. We've got to protect ourselves. We've got to protect others. We've got to wear our masks. We've got to sanitize. We've got to make sure we keep our social distance. But this is not the way we're supposed to live. And we've got to perish the thought that we're going, that this has become, everybody talks about it as the new normal. The new normal, for a while, I understand, I get it. The new normal is not that we're going to spend the rest of our time now davening at home. The new normal is not that we're not going to go back to shul. The new normal is not that we're not going to socially interact on at least some level in order to be able to have minyanim and hear Torah readings and so on. The new normal is that we need to have and I'll say this reservedly, but we need to have a more balanced view from a Jewish point of view of the world. Because it's not just that the essentials are my grocery shopping and my coffee and my gym and perhaps having my hair done or my nails done or whatever it is that ladies out there do, and that's essential, but that Torah, Yiddishkeit, davening, shul, Friday night attendance, etc., is not essential. No, we've got to rethink that. We've got to remember that the latter is more essential. And if it can be done, and it can certainly be done in a safe space and in a safe environment, as I think we've got to commend the shuls, the rabbis, the communities of South Africa in the way that they have really, really pulled together. I think it stands as a sparkling bright light, where we can't say it necessarily about communities in other parts of the world, where it seems that Jews, especially Frumis, I guess, in many places have flaunted and gone against the protocols and so on. Here, an incredible adherence to the systems, to the protocols, to the protection of life, to the care for other people, etc., etc., etc. But there's going to be one ingredient that we're going to need in order for it to carry on, and that's the people. People need to get back to shul. People need to realize that these things are essential in our lives. we actually can't live as islands. We can't live without each other. We need each other much more than we can imagine. We need other people around us. We need the social interaction. We need the minyanim for Kaddish. We need all of that. And we need people around us to celebrate our simchas, to commiserate with us, God forbid, when we have losses and so on. We need all of that. Think about how many mitzvahs in Torah have got to do with other people, whether it's davening, or whether it's hospital visitation, or whether it's bikur cholim, whether it's kibud avaim. There's so many things that have got to do with other people. We need to be able to reintegrate and go back to that kind of a way of life as well. So let's not get too comfortable in lockdown. Let's not get too comfortable in our ark. Say min ateva, God told Noah, go out of the ark. There comes a time where we actually have to do that, because our job is actually out there. Yes, as we said, with the protocols. Yes, with the precautions. But don't get yourself into the rut of saying, you know what, shul doesn't need me, as long as the minyan is running, people are there, it's fine. No, as much as shul needs you, you need it. Ask not what you can do for your community, but what your community can do for you, and ask not what your community can do for you, but ask what you can do for your community. Noah comes along to teach us that there is a pandemic. Noah comes along to teach us that there was a flood. Noah comes along to teach us that we've got to learn the lessons, and we've got to go out, and we've got to get back into the world at some stage. And yes, some of us, it might take longer than others. Some of us are slow starters. We grant that. Some of us don't learn as quickly as the others, but we've got to get there. And we've got to remember that our program is not to stay like this ad infinitum. And it needs reminding, because sometimes we get very used to the so-called creature comforts that we've established around ourselves, and we get into a rut and we don't want to go anywhere. We become panic-stricken. We become scared. I can tell you frankly, yes, I'm scared. You're scared to go to certain environments. You're scared to be amongst a crowd of people. You're scared when they're not observing and you are observing. You're scared of all of those things. But somehow we've got to get back to it, because that's our job. So get out of the ark in your mind, and eventually we'll be able to get out of it in heart and soul as well, and then finally, hopefully, in body. I want to wish you a great Parshat Noach coming up, a wonderful Shabbos up ahead, and thanks for your indulgence and for listening today. I hope I made my point clear. Take care.
Thanks, Rabbi Katz. Thank you. Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Keep well.
Good Shabbos to everybody.
Thank you.
Good Shabbos. Thank you.
Thanks, Rabbi Katz. You hit the nail on the head. It's very comfortable in lockdown.
I did.
We've all become archaic.
Yeah.
Ha ha ha.
About what you're
I
wearing.
don't know. I've also noticed that I think that people have aged quicker in lockdown as well.
Oh, we're archaic.
That's right. Especially us oldies.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Take care. Keep well, everybody.
Thanks, Rabbi. Thank you.